Welcome to the Asking Why podcast. I'm your host, Clint Davis. I'm a marriage and family therapist and licensed professional counselor trained in trauma and addiction. The Asking Why podcast is for anyone on a journey of healing and restoration. If you are searching for answers to life's questions and want to learn more about root causes from a psychological and theological mix, this show is for you. In this podcast, myself and a co-host from Clint Davis Counseling and Integrative Wellness will interview guests on a wide range of topics in order to get down to the heart of the problems facing our world and understand why things happen and how to change the world and ourselves for the better. Want to learn more tips and tricks to living a healthy lifestyle? Visit us at Clint Davis Counseling and Integrative Wellness on Facebook and Instagram. If you want to meet our staff or book a speaker, go to clintdaviscounseling.com. Thanks for listening and be sure to subscribe today. All right, welcome to the Asking Why podcast, episode 25. And we have Aaron and Shannon Crawford. Welcome.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
Yeah, so for those listening, Aaron and Shannon are dear friends of mine, and they're amazing people. And so we wanted to talk a little bit today about fostering and adopting. They have lots of great experience with that. And so being a clinician and being a therapist, I see a lot of family members who have been adopted, who have been through the foster care system. I worked for the Children's Home for years and kind of saw the mess that the foster care system can be and also the amazingness that the foster care and adoption system can be. So for those listening, why is this important? So some statistics that I wanted to read off is that there are about 440,000 people in the foster care system, children in the U.S., and 8 million worldwide. 1 in 5 ends up homeless by the age of 18. 50% of them are never employed, and only 3% of them ever get degrees. And so staying in the foster care system for a long time or not being adopted leads to long-term problematic issues in your life, in your marriage, in your family. We know this from ACEs scores and ACEs studies that talk about adverse childhood effects. And so one of the things that I know you guys have done and stepped in is to, adopt and foster and do all those things. And so I thought it's something that people don't get a chance to talk about very much. I think people have a lot of assumptions and myths and fears, which I think keeps people from either supporting people who are choosing to do it or choosing to do it or doing it themselves. And so I just wanted to kind of have you guys on and talk about it. So tell people listening kind of who you are and what you do currently, job-wise.
You go first.
Aaron Crawford, and I'm originally from Bossier, grew up here, went away for about 15 years for schooling, to find the love of my life, and which was the law. Just kidding. My wife is what I meant.
We didn't meet that long ago.
Yeah, that's right.
We've been knowing each other for 11 years.
Right. And then came back here. I went to law school, and we got married actually before that. Went to law school. Came back and worked here as a lawyer for the past over a decade, and we've got 3 children. We've got our 2 daughters. One's 11. One's 12. One's 9, and then our son who we adopted, who's 6. We've been married 17 years, going on 18, and really enjoying life.
That's awesome.
I'm Shannon Crawford. I went to school to be a nurse. I still am an RN, but I have been home, I guess, for the last 5 years, just staying at home. When our son had major surgery at a year old, it just became a lot. And so I decided that was what we needed to do. He was in a good place with this job that we were able to do that. So that's what I've been doing, staying at home.
Yeah. Raising
our kiddos, and sometimes other people's. So, friends too. I feel like, if anybody says they ever need childcare or help with, I just want to jump in and help with that. So
I can vouch for that. I think you've offered to come over and sleep at our house or stay up with our kid or stay up at our kid while we sleep, or about 100 million times.
Yeah.
So,
and also have done some work as a night nanny.
Yeah.
Also, just because my background in the NICU, people feel comfortable apparently with me watching their tiny babies at night. So do that some too.
Well, they're comfortable sleeping, that's for sure. Either way.
Yeah.
It's a big deal.
Yeah,
They
that's
are very
huge.
grateful for sleep.
No, for sure. So because of that, right? Because of being friends with you forever, walking and seeing what you guys have been through, I just thought number one, it's an amazing story, and number two, it's a very common story. I mean, other people adopt, other people foster, but you guys, I mean, do something that's so difficult, but never really do the rest of us who haven't gone through that kind of get an inside view. So tell me, kind of what led you guys to adoption, fostering. How did that play out, or when did God kind of put that in your lap of a thing that you were like, oh, we got to do this?
So because of some health issues that I have, I wasn't sure, I mean, even before we got married, if I was going to be able to have kids or not. And so adoption was always in the back of my mind if we couldn't have children naturally. And so I think I shared that probably like on our second date.
She laid it all out as soon as possible.
Yeah.
Dream, like I always wanted to adopt a little girl from China. That's what I thought I would do. But anyways, we did not have trouble and ended up with 2 beautiful little girls. And then after that, I still had that pull, that tug on my heart. And so we looked into foreign adoption. But for anyone who's done it or looked into it, it is 1, very expensive. 2, there's a lot of requirements. Some of them we didn't make enough money for or have enough room, or we had too many children already to qualify for those. And I don't know how people do it, but I wanted a country where you could go and meet them and then you bring them home with you. I didn't want to go meet my child and then have to leave them there. And so it left us with like 2 countries, I think.
Well, I think also that, I mean, the restrictions kept changing and it kept getting harder, and they would, while we were looking, I mean, we looked for a couple months at different countries and we'd find one, and then all of a sudden they had changed the restrictions and it made it more restrictive. And we were like, okay, well, is this really what we're supposed to be doing?
Yeah.
So some friends at church had gone through foster training. It wasn't for them and they chose a different venue, but asked, have you ever, thought about it, which we hadn't. And so went to classes, finished those, did our home study, and before we were even certified foster parents, we got a call. They fast-tracked our paperwork to get this little boy who, at first we thought I was just going to help mom, like she was having trouble feeding him, and then he was going to go back home after we did some helping with the parents, and here we are.
Yep. He's here now forever.
Okay, so tell that story. I mean, so let's go back. So tell me about training. So if somebody's out there and they're like, okay, well, what training? I mean, from my experience, I know for a long time, there's like 14 classes or something like that.
Yeah, I think it was once a week for maybe 2 hours, 3 hours, and we would go and have a training, and you'd watch a couple of videos, you'd have live presentation, and then you'd also kind of discuss things back and forth, and it was a lot. I mean, it was a really interesting class, but it was also very daunting, because you get to hear all the horror stories. First of all, they want to make sure you're not going into it blind, which is good, but also well, how would I be able to handle that? How can I do that? And one of the things we learned obviously very early was that you don't really know what's going to happen until it starts happening. I went to school for years and years and years, and I went to law school for 3 years, and I thought I understood the law, but it wasn't until I got into a courtroom and started experiencing it every day that I said, okay, this is what the law is. It's not what I memorized. That's the principles are there, but the action wasn't there. And so the same thing with foster care. We had the principles going through the classes, and I thought we learned a lot about it. It was very interesting, but it wasn't until every day was going on and we were dealing with all these different parts of it and the different emotions and different things that kept coming up that we realized this is how this is supposed to happen, and this is what happened. So,
For one, I am a little bit of a control freak, maybe. And I like to plan and know what's happening, and that goes out the window. You don't know. Sometimes they, give you information I mean, it may say it's a boy and it's a girl. It may say they're 6 months old and they're 6 years old. I mean, you don't know. And you get a call and you have hours or less to get ready for who knows what to come into your house. Because even if you know all the facts that they know, you don't really know what's gone on in that child's life before they set foot in your home. So yeah, I don't think anything can really prepare you. It's all, on-job training.
Absolutely.
I think a lot of the, well, at least with our experience, our first placement was Sam, our son, but he was, a foster child for us for 3 years, and he was only 7 weeks old at the time, so we had a baby. And so we didn't have a lot of the, the other things that had gone on. He hadn't experienced life enough to have any other trauma that we knew about. And so that was a different experience for us that was definitely different from a lot of other parents that have had to experience it and what they've had to go through. But it was not easy also because of his issues and the things that he had going on. And we didn't know about those. I don't know who knew about them, but it was a discovery process of, we have this baby, we're taking care of him, and then things just started happening, and we had to kind of, figure things out on the fly and figure things out as they were going on. So
Right.
And I'm a little bit different too. Even people who've told their adoption stories say, it took them a while to become attached, and, there wasn't that fuzzy feeling right away. For whatever reason, God gave me that right away. I had that strong maternal instinct, and I remember the first time I dropped him off for a visit. I mean, I bawled my eyes out in the car, and he hadn't even been with us that long, but it was just like an instant, attachment. And possibly I needed that because he had so many medical problems that would it have been harder, if I hadn't had that attachment.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think that's being honest about how we feel, right? And being authentic about like what's scary, and that we only have so much love to give, and when things are difficult and they're not our kid biologically,
right,
that it's easier to be like, oh, well, goodbye. But that's where God gives us this attachment, and where I think moving from foster to adoption, it's like, that's not just a term, like that's a heart issue.
right.
And I think gracefully God gave you that. And again, for people that are out there, I think dads experience this, parents experience this with their own kids though. I've heard all kinds of stories on the spectrum of, it took me 3 months to attach to my son or my daughter, it took me 6 months, or once they hit 1, or once they could talk, or what, then all of a sudden, and so I think that has a lot to do with God's grace, but also just our history and our personalities. And I think it's amazing how God just knits all that together and gives you, what you need.
Yeah. And I've honestly never, I've been attached to other children who've been in our home, no doubt, but I've never felt what I felt for Sam, with any other child that's been in our home. And obviously they've all gone home. So,
Yeah.
So with Sam at, our first placement, it started off, we had him come into the home, and then I think it was the next 2 or 3 days later, they had the first initial court appearance. And in that court appearance, the parents were there. I think Shannon was there. I was not there. So Shannon had gone for the first time, and she said it was just kind of a whirlwind. I can let her tell the whole story, but basically the parents were gone after that. Like, they were not coming back anytime soon. They were going to another state.
Mm-hmm.
And so all of a sudden, it wasn't going to be, visitations and things like that. It was, this is your child, take care of them until further notice.
Yeah,
and so there was no other information that we had at that time. And so it was a little jarring because, in the back of my head, foster care to me was, we're going to watch a kid for 2 or 3 weeks, maybe a month. We'll make sure that they're safe, cared for, fed, but I wasn't expecting long-term that this will be going on, necessarily for indefinite time. And so
Yeah.
I think the first thing we got was like 6 months to a year is probably before, something will start happening. And I was like, okay, that's new to me.
Yeah, no, I remember, I think we were doing a D group shortly after that, but
Yeah.
I remember you talking about like what you were going to do, and then we didn't talk, and then all of a sudden it was like a new thing.
Right.
So I can imagine for you guys, like as much as it was for your friends,
Yeah.
to be like, what is happening right now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was constantly like that. What something new is going to happen, and what's going to happen next, kind of thing.
Yeah, God's grace a lot.
Yeah, for sure.
And a lot of friends and family stepping in to help, which may be a characteristic of people who do this, but we do not like asking for help or accepting it. So that was a big stretch. I think I'm just now getting to where I will actually, text somebody and say, hey, one's at this doctor's appointments, once I can't be in two places at once. And just realizing that, yeah, we can't do it alone, and we're not supposed to.
That's good. Yeah, it's been, so I think that's one of the stories is that people really, as much as you can plan and as much as you can get better training, I think one of the things we talked about before, but I've talked about with a bunch of people is, making the trauma, making the adoption training or the foster training more trauma informed and really equipping parents a little better across the whole training instead of just like, okay, we're going to talk about this, and then these 3 points are going to be focused on the trauma or the emotional things. I think obviously there can be some better prep in that area. What would you say to that?
Yeah, but I mean, again, I don't know, there's such a wide spectrum, like you were saying, of just different things that happen, from, little tics that a child may have to, very, trauma that I've never, even fathomed, and that they've had to go through. And so, yeah, you can, the more knowledge you have is definitely good and should be used, but it's so hard to say, well, if you have this, this, and this, then you'll be prepared for this. It's just, that's not how it works. I don't think, or hasn't worked in our experience.
I mean, I think TBRI training is helpful and eye-opening and just explains things that you may not have, ever experienced or come across before in your life. And, DCSF makes those available to all foster parents. Right now it's virtual. When it's not, it's, in person.
But it's not mandated. You can just, it's like an option.
You can use it for training hours.
Okay. Gotcha. So TBRI is, I know what it is, but tell the people listening, trauma-based relational interventions, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
yeah, that's right.
So just how your brain reacts after it's been, which, I mean, we've all experienced some kind of trauma, but, we've had kids come in that have been burned, broken limbs. We haven't had any, sexual abuse or anything like that. Most of ours have been under the age of 3. But that happens too. And I mean, how do you
prepare for that?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I think more what I would say is the preparing is, and I know you both, so this is probably why it's, you both are pretty, I mean, I would say extremely healthy people. You're mature in your spiritual life, you're mature in your marriage, you don't have, as far as I know, unresolved trauma that you've never talked about with each other, so I think that's what I mean. You're also not the average person going into foster care, and not to hate on the average person, but we all have so much of a mess, and then we get into wanting to adopt, or we're going through our own grief around not being able to have our own kids, and none of that gets resolved. And I think that's part of the training that I mean. It's not necessarily giving you information, but preparing you in a way emotionally and having some kind of like, are you in a place where this is actually what's best for you? And just like having biological kids, you know this, you're never ready. Right. I mean, you can do all the things, you can read all the books, and then that baby comes home with you and has some special need or some issue or sleep, and then you're like, I have no clue, nor do I care at this moment how to do the right thing.
Yeah. I've been experiencing, I was listening to a podcast yesterday, and they were talking about just being in the church and being a Christian in church, and there is no lone Christian. You have to have a body of believers that is there to support you and encourage you and lift you up and speak truth into you when you're not following in that, and so that you could be corrected and know and grow in Christ. And the same exact thing for a foster family, I think. If we didn't have the family that we had and the body of believers that we had at the time, we would have been sinking. It would have been bad. We had people that were lifting us up, encouraging us, giving, when we had nothing left to give, people poured into us. And so, I mean, that's the common theme though, right? I mean, I think about people on the mission field. I mean, they need the same thing. They need people to pour into them because they're all by themselves. Sometimes you feel like that as a foster parent, that you are all by yourself.
Yeah.
And it can be daunting. I've said that twice now. I never have ever said daunting before, and now I've said it 3 times.
My favorite word.
Yeah, favorite word.
Yeah, that's right. But again, you can get easily into that isolation and depression and all those other things because you feel like no one really understands. And the state, DCFS, they do the best they can with the resources they have, but they are severely understaffed as well. And there's not everybody there is doing what they can, but for the most part we've had good experiences with that. But and there's other resources, but not knowing about those resources too is a big deal. So all of that combined can easily be overwhelming.
Yeah, I mean that's part of why I wanted to have you guys on here, was to like put this out here. So if y'all are talking to somebody, you can go, hey, I can't regurgitate all this over coffee, but go listen to this, podcast, and it'll give you some direction and some ideas of what we went through and what we didn't know and what we can do differently. And so, yeah.
And two, going back kind of to, your marriage being strong, or if you have any other, there are questions they ask you in your home study about traumas in your life that would bring it up. But some people don't realize they even are holding on to something until they get in the middle.
Absolutely. That's what's called
and
a
I've
trigger.
had several friends
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
then at that point are like, I can't do this right now. Like, I need to seek help for myself and deal with this. And awesome that they recognize it. Some people don't.
Yeah, there's so much shame in that. It's like sometimes you could have done better and known better, but sometimes you just don't. Some unrepressed, uninvited trauma from your past with your dad, with your mom. And y'all know this with with our biological kids that happens.
Right.
You think you're ready and you have a kid, and then you realize, oh man, I haven't dealt with any of my attachment or my issues, and here I am trying to love this kid while currently having a problem.
Yeah.
I also don't actually recommend it to people who are struggling with infertility, because the purpose of foster care is to reunite them with their families if that is safe, whether it's their parents or grandparents or aunts or whatever. And if you're going into it with the mindset of I'm doing this to adopt a child, I think you're setting yourself up. By all means, it happens, and people have happy endings like that, but it's not a guarantee.
Yeah.
And so I really think that through and protect yourself. And if you're emotionally prepared for that,
Right.
especially if you've had, lost pregnancies or, you've already experienced a loss like that, and to bring a child in and, this is something you've always wanted, and become attached, and then they go home. I think that's too, part of the misconception. Like, it's like immediately the parents are like the enemy to people. Like, they're like, oh, they're, terrible people. Like, look what they've done to their child. And we can't think like that. Because you're trying to, yes, keep a child safe and do what's best for them, but like help a family to heal and to find what's gone wrong. Because a lot of times they're just coming out of the same pattern, and that's all they've known. That's all they've seen. And they don't know any different.
Right.
And if we're just, automatically out of the gate, they're the enemy, we're not open to helping them.
Yeah. And I
think that's huge.
Absolutely. I think that's, exactly why I want to talk about this, because I think that's the information that people need, is to go into it kind of understanding, how do people end up in foster care? Our family's just terrible people that do terrible things. Well, no, we're all terrible people, right? According to the gospel. But the reality is there are people that are low income, low resources, history of trauma, history of neglect, history of abandonment, and of course they're going to do neglectful things unintentionally, but they're not horrible people who are just like, I don't care about my kid and I'm going to do this.
Right.
And again, most of the people who have that assumption haven't actually done what you're doing, which is get to know the families, see the families, hear their stories. And I say all the time, if you could sit on the couch with somebody and disciple them and love them and get to know them, their story is going to make perfect sense. neglecting their kid, beating their kid, being addicted, whatever the thing is, you're going to look at them once you know them and go, oh, well, this makes perfect sense, and I would have done the same thing.
Right.
The problem is we make these judgments and these sweeping statements without actually ever getting to know the people that we're making these judgments of.
Which we haven't had a ton of opportunity to be able to do what we have with our last placement, just because either they weren't in our home that long, or, I mean, sometimes it's severe, not like parents incarcerated. So,
right.
You're not going to have that chance to see them, but
you can have that heart posture
yes,
regardless.
Yes.
Yeah. And that takes learning and getting to know things and reading, talking to other foster parents that are healthy. And
so our last placement we had for 6 months, and that's the longest we've had a child in our home besides Samuel. So it was very different for a lot of ways, but people say like, oh gosh, like, but aren't you attached? Like, and he's going to go back. I'm like, he's not mine. Like, his mom wants him back.
Yeah.
And she's doing everything she can to get him back. He's not mine. Like, he's mine for now. And even she understood that, like, you were his other mom for these 6 months, and she's very grateful. And, we still communicate, and it's a good relationship, but that she can come to me and ask questions. And, anyways, that we've, helped to bring this family back together. It's the point, like, that's the point.
That's good. Yeah. So you have to go into it with the goal is reunification, right? That you're going in to be a surrogate, and I mean, it's funny, but that's kind of how I view therapy. It's like, right. I meet with people who've never been honest with anybody. They've never had vulnerability. They've never shared their trauma, but I don't want to be their mom or dad. I don't want to be their brother or their best friend. Right. And for my clients listening, sorry, they know that, but like, I want you to practice with me and use this circumstance to find yourself and your safety and your identity so that you can go and, make disciples or connect with people or, repair your relationship with your dad. Right. But that's the goal, right? If I came in assuming like, hey, I'm going to be your friend and they're going to be my friend and I'm going to give you all you need and then we're going to do this forever, then there's no reason for them to do it. And everybody would be really disappointed and upset if that was the case.
Right.
So I think it's perfect. I mean, it's a great analogy because it's like you guys, are that surrogate until you can reunite. And then sometimes that ends in adoption. I mean, for you guys, that ended the first way that way.
But right. I think one of my biggest regrets from Sam's adoption is the fact that we have no contact with his family whatsoever. He has siblings out there that, as far as I know right now, we'll never know. Mm-hmm. Parents that will have no contact with them. That's sad to me. I mean, I'm glad he doesn't really know. I mean, he was a baby and, just his mental capacity. I mean, I don't think he grasped that. I think there's probably something in him that I can imagine still knows his mom and there's something probably still there, but all the visits, they didn't show up or whatever, like, it wasn't upsetting to him. He didn't know any better. Right. That was a blessing to me. Other kids who are older and go to visits with their parents, they don't show up. It's just like adding on top of abandonment and trauma that's already there.
That's right. I mean, you could probably have several other podcasts just about, what the kids are going through.
Oh, for
and
sure.
I mean,
I'm going to.
Yeah, I'm sure you will. But as far as us, seeing that, seeing those kind of situations and not even just with us, with other parents that are fostering that we've made friends with or that we know, and disappointment that's happened in their lives and just knowing, that's part of this process. There's almost an expectation that there will be disappointment, just like in our walk with Christ, that there's going to be suffering. We know that this is not going to line up perfectly. We want it to continue moving towards where God can continue working in it, but that it takes time because of all the things that are going on around it. But, I think our biggest, takeaway is that, not that we're so supposed to be successful and all these kids that we've had are going to be success stories. We want to give them the best chance, but we want to be obedient to what God's called us to. And if He's placed a child in our home, that they would be safe, that they would be protected, that they would be taken care of, and that they would be loved while they're there. And so, that's really where we see, our role as a foster parent is is to give them every opportunity while they're with us, but also that they would know the love of God through us. And then also, that they wouldn't be afraid.
It's good.
We got off on Sam. I think we've slowly talked about him, but just for people that don't know our son, he has severe disabilities, and we kind of went through that whole journey of finding out, where he had 5 surgeries in a year. I think from maybe 6 months old to about a year and a half to 2 years, he had about 5 different surgeries. Shannon and I spent more time than I've ever been in a hospital during that time. We spent probably a cumulative of like 4 weeks between the two of us in hospitals with Sam while he was going through different things. And that was just a huge, it was very trying, very trying time.
Daunting, would you say?
Yeah, I would definitely say daunting.
Daunting,
yeah,
for sure.
And
Thanks.
so yeah, exactly. And the fact of it was that with Isabel, our first child, I was scared to death because I'd heard all these stories. And as a first, a father not having a child or getting ready to be a father, I just remember, what if she has something wrong with her? What am I going to do? How am I going to be able to react to that? Can I even handle that? And thankfully she did not. I mean, she was great. I mean, she had allergies, and we had to deal with some of that stuff, and that's, what it is. But we have 2 wonderful children. And when Sam came and he had all of these disabilities, God had put me in a much different place. But we had to still work through it, and together. But, I've grown so much from it, and I know we can take care of him. I know that we can do all things through him who gives us strength. And so we rely on that every day, and that's how we get through. But also we love that boy, as much as if he had come from us, and, and that's what I was thinking of right before we started. I read yesterday, and we were talking in one of my Bible studies yesterday about Galatians 4, which is part of that. I think it's Galatians 4 through 8, that Jesus came and died on the cross so that we could be adopted into his family. And that as adopted people, we're not just part of the house of God. We are co-heirs with Christ. I mean, he gives us the full, his full plate of everything he would give Jesus as co-heirs. And that never really made any sense to me until we had Sam with us, and living with him every day, and knowing the love that we have for him, that we would give him everything. So anyway,
It's good. Aaron's turned into a big crier now.
I can't look at him.
Yeah.
He's crying.
I told Clint last week, I said, I think it's God's practical joke on me. We used to brag, Shannon and I she'd be like, you never cry about anything. And I was like, yeah, I know. I'm real
And
strong.
he'd say like secret cry, like, oh, I watched this movie and cried. I'm like, I didn't see it.
So it didn't count.
Yeah.
And now
I tell people the tears are in the back of my face.
That's right. And so now, anytime I talk about God and what he's done in my life, like I just start tearing up, and I'm like, this is God just laughing at me every time because
Trying to be tough.
Yeah, I thought I was a tough guy. So
No, I remember. I mean, it's been cool to be a good friend of yours and watch you transition, as a dad, as a husband, as a follower of Christ. I mean, yeah, I came over to your house, 2 weeks ago on a Monday to talk about stuff, and we were both crying and praying, and I'm like, who's this dude? It's awesome.
Yeah.
We touched on it earlier too about, like Aaron said, the loneliness, especially first placement. You're not supposed to say anything. You're not supposed to tell anybody like details about, where they're coming from and like what's going on. And so like I felt super isolated. And then, as things started to show up health-wise with him, it's like, not only do you feel alone in this, like we're fostering and nobody else gets what this feels like, but now I'm dealing with special needs that I've never done and dealt with before, and I don't know anyone who is, and now I'm like, this is separate. And like I tried multiple times to go to special needs mom groups or whatever, but I don't know, like we don't fit in a box. So.
No, you don't. I was thinking about what we were talking because, I mean, Sam's what, 6. Yeah, because Grady and Sam are around the same. I mean, y'all got him around the same time we had Grady. And so it's been, I know we've talked about this a bunch, but it's been an interesting thing being your friend because we were going through 2.5, almost 3 years of just feeling like we're in this crisis with no support, not knowing what's happening, going to Dallas, selling a house, selling a car, and you guys were going through the same thing. And it's like, I mean, we kind of supported each other, but neither one of us could really show up. I mean, you offered to come over, and we were laughing because it was like, Shannon and them have this kid who has all these special needs, and she's offering to come over and sleep, keep our kid while we sleep.
She would just leave me with everybody.
Yeah, exactly.
She's like, oh, you can handle this. I'll go.
And Aaron's going to board game convention. No, but JC would always say to me, yeah, but could you imagine if this wasn't our birthed kid and all these things are going? And it's just reality. It's just a different level of commitment. Now, obviously, you both would say God gave us the strength and it's not us, but you guys had to do it, and you made these choices, and like you said, you never know what you're going to get.
And we didn't go into it.
Right.
It's not on our paperwork that we take special needs kids.
Right.
That's not written somewhere. They knew I was a nurse, so they
Yeah.
said, oh, she'll be able to help with feedings. But
Yeah.
it's not like we were, some saints are like, we will take all of the special needs kids. Like,
Yeah,
we
for
feel
sure.
like we can really, no, we didn't ask for it. We didn't prepare for it,
It doesn't
but,
help that you have two
God
amazing
knew.
daughters who also, I mean, watching them with Sam has been just such a beautiful, I mean, I'm sure it hadn't been perfect, but I mean, I've been around them a lot, and they've been, I mean, pretty amazing, although I'm sure it took a toll, which we'll talk about in a little while.
Yeah.
I want to stick on misconceptions, though. Any other misconceptions? Because you mentioned it.
I'll tell you things that I don't like to hear.
Okay, you want to go there? Yeah. So what not to say to people who are adopting and fostering?
Don't ever use the term real mom. We're all filling a role of mother, father, whatever in their lives. You could say birth mom or just mom. I don't care, but something with and maybe it's just a trigger for me and no one else cares, but
No, a lot of people care about that.
real mom. I mean, doctor's offices, friends, whatever. Also, because of, for a child to go into foster care, there's some kind of abuse or neglect that's happened. There's nothing happy about us having a child in our home. We are happy to take care of them, but that's not like a joyous occasion.
Right.
So it's so awkward to me when people congratulate you. Like, oh, congratulations. Like, you just got a foster. I'm like, we didn't just have a baby. Like, this kid's been through trauma, and so now they're in our home. Like, it's not a congratulatory.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I think people just don't really
Know what
to say.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I don't know. That would
Well, they
always make me
will
feel
now.
awkward,
Yeah. That's right.
according to Shannon. I also have plenty of special needs things not to do, too.
No, go for it. That's why we're here.
Go
Well,
ahead.
just one misconception I was thinking of, that we've had a fantastic time with the kids. All the kids that have come in our house, we've had some terrible days. We've had where it's really beaten us down, but they're kids, and it's fun to play with kids. It's fun to watch them grow. I mean, getting the last placement we got to watch him double in size and start crawling, and just the little things that he was doing that we got to experience with him and play with our kids and him was just just a great experience. And so we really enjoyed that time. So there is that. And then also I think one of the other misconceptions is kids aren't going to be fixed within a week. Like, if you have this child, like this is a process, and it is a long process, and sometimes you may not see how the child is getting better.
Yeah, any of the fruit of your labor you don't
Right.
necessarily get to see. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so that's not necessarily, that doesn't mean you're a bad foster parent. There's other reasons you could be a bad foster parent. There's lots of those things, but because the child hasn't changed or is still having the issues that they had when they came in, it's not necessarily reflective on you. It's just part of the process. And so, knowing that and realizing that can be a big help, because
Absolutely.
it's hard when you don't see results. We want to see results. We want to see the end result, and we want to see, everyone being joyous and happy and having a great time, but that's not necessarily going to happen. So.
Yeah, I think that would speak to what Shannon said about having your perspective and your agenda going into it. Like there's going to be disappointment for sure, but if you're expecting to be the hero, right, or the fixer, or
Right.
you know, I'll never forget when we first started Purchased, Not For Sale, which is our human trafficking program for women. One of the girls, I can't remember, it was 3 or 4 years ago, 5 years ago, she said, you know, you kind of treat this program like it's the promised land. You know, like we've arrived, we have all these resources, we have all this help, you know, you have classes, you have therapy, but this is not the promised land. This is our desert. Like this is me having to do all this work and all this toil. The promised land is me out of this program, living my life free and healthy. And it was just such a beautiful, and it's kind of like foster care. It's like they don't arrive and they you know, although you are great people and they're in a safer environment, the promised land for them is back with their parents in a healthy state, doing what God intended to happen.
Absolutely.
You know, and we're working off of a faulty premise that they're here now in this great white hope, you know, or whatever, middle class or whatever ethnicity you are. It happened to be white. But the reality is like, you're not the end all be all for these people.
Right.
Right. That the goal is reunification and restoration.
I think too, like,
That makes sense.
knowing what your limits are and what you can handle. It's not like there's no shame in that. There's no, well, gosh, I'm saying no to this. So like, do they even want me as a foster parent? Because I think, you know, sometimes you do take on too much or more than you can. And then they're switching to another home. And not that there's anything wrong with that either. I mean, please, like, let somebody know if you've gotten in over your head, and ask for help or to change homes if that's what it, and I think that's a misconception too. Like, I failed if, you know, well, maybe your home's just not the right one. And it might be not the third one or the fourth one, but maybe the fifth one. I mean, we hope that doesn't happen, but that's reality, that every child's not gonna, and they're not gonna fit like in your family necessarily. I mean, we've had children of different races. Obviously, we go out to eat and, you know, bring all the attention.
Well, and
what's going on here?
We've gotten calls before, and you know, Shannon always will call me, and you know, because I'm usually at work when she gets the call, and she's like, okay, this is what they want to do. They want to send this child over, and once we have some details, and we've said no before, and I always am like, man, I don't want to say no, because first of all, I know Shannon's already at a place. She's like, I'm ready to go, but you know, we've got to be in the right place, and that doesn't mean we have to be perfect, or you know, that everything's going great, or that I don't want to mess what's going on, because it is going really well. But it needs to be right, and you know, first of all, that's prayer. You know, immediately we have to pray about it, but you know, just knowing our limitations and knowing that it is okay to say no, because we've got to be able to do the best we can, and have to be in a good place for that.
Absolutely.
And why your marriage needs to be strong in your communication with each other, because we're complete opposites. So when he's on the phone, like, I don't know, I'm like, we got to do this. But sometimes he's like, Shannon, you're not in a good place to do this right now. Like, even though your feelings are involved. And I have to say, like, this last placement, when they called me, like, it was so reminiscent of the phone call I got for Sam, just like some of the details that, I mean, like, she had me from the moment she told me that, you know. And Aaron, yes, always at first is like, I don't know, like, if we can do it or not.
Right, I need a few days to think about it. And she's always,
and I'm
minutes.
like on board from the beginning, and then like once they get there, I'm like, now what?
What did I do?
And he's like, totally cool then.
Yeah. Well, once I commit, we're committed. Let's just do it. You know,
sure.
But before then, I want to make sure that it's the right. Yeah. So we are opposite in that.
I want to talk a little bit too, if this is okay.
Yeah.
What some of this has brought out. There's a lot of mourning involved. There's a lot of grief. There's grief with special needs parenting, and you're realizing what they may or may not ever do. And then when you bring another child into your home that may have had, you know, traumatic things happen, but they're normal functioning, and to watch them doing things that your son can't do is sometimes really hard. And I can't say his name, but our last placement especially, which it was kind of a mixed thing. Like, so excited. Like I've never seen a kid make strides as quickly as he did. The therapists were amazed. Like, he's doing so well. Just meeting all these milestones that he hadn't. I think there was always like a doubt in my mind, like maybe I didn't do enough for him. Like, I didn't work with him enough.
For Sam?
And that's for Sam, why he didn't reach these. And so it was kind of like, well, you worked with, this child and he did make progress. Like, that just wasn't in the cards for Sam. Like, it didn't have anything to do with me.
Yeah.
So as upsetting as it is to watch, like, it's also like reassurance from God that, you can do this and you are making a difference. And, anyways.
Yeah. I mean, I would.
So a gift in the sorrow, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's the two truths at the same time thing. It's really difficult to sit there and watch this baby grow and crawl and do all the things when you guys did all those same things with Sam, who is your child, who you've adopted, who is now 6, and he can't.
Right.
That's devastating. It doesn't take away from the fact that you're joyful for this kid, but it also is still painful for this kid.
Yeah.
And I think we all just have such a hard time being able to sit in the middle of both of those things. And I think that's where the objective and the narrative like kind of come together for, in my opinion, of Christianity and Jesus, is because that's what we're always having to hold, is that we're in this world and this world is important and it means something and it's a transition into eternity. And at the same time, there's a better thing coming. Mm-hmm. And so we can't be like, the whole earth is groaning for the restoration, so let's just all wait to get to heaven.
Right.
Well, at the same time, like, well, no, but we also are still mourning how bad it sucks while still trying to enjoy it at the same time.
And I think that's why transitioning out of your home, like back home, like, you're so happy. This is what you worked for this whole time. But they're still like, it's still hard.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure. Because you love them.
Yeah.
You take them in. And there's a metaphysical, I mean, I think we're in the image of God family, and this is your family member that you now adopted in. And
right.
Even though you didn't adopt him on paper and legally, there's a piece of your heart that holds that.
Yeah.
It's tough.
Yeah.
You got some?
No. Okay. I was going to say we cry all the time.
So yeah, it's fine.
We also laugh a lot. I think that's humor has helped us through some hard stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you are funny people, so that definitely, you got to laugh to keep from crying sometimes, or laugh and do both.
Right.
So we talked about this a little bit, but what do you feel like you would tell somebody that they need to know before? I mean, we talked about a little bit of it, but anything you'd like people to know before they choose foster care?
I mean, just that most important thing, that what the goal of it is.
Yeah.
Knowing what the goal of it is, and
so don't have in your back pocket like,
way.
oh, we're going to foster, but hopefully we adopt this kid.
Yeah.
I mean, that's problematic, right? I mean, is what we're saying.
Right. And there are lots of people that do that. That's their hope. And, I can't tell you what their experience is with that, because that wasn't, we knew about it. We talked about it. We certainly had looked at adoption first, but that, we knew not every child that comes in our home is going to be adopted for us. Mm-hmm. And so knowing that ahead of time was good, even though the first placement we got was our only adoption, and so, but
they
yeah,
say
absolutely.
It works that way. Like, the people that plan on, it doesn't happen for, and the people that don't, it happens for.
Right. But our plans are always faulty anyway. We think we've got it all figured out, and it's because we're thinking with our own plans instead of what God's got planned. So being able to just give in to that.
And I mean, already have your support system in place, your family on board, your friends on board, and be willing to ask for and accept help.
Yeah, in that note, like, what are some mistakes that you guys made early on that you would, that you haven't done this way, or that you would say don't do this?
Exactly that, like
not asking for help.
Yeah. Yeah. And thinking that, I mean, I'm just like that naturally anyways, just like housework even. Like, I mean, I'll just do it all until I'm exhausted and whatever, and not ask him. And finally he's like, Shannon, just tell me to do it. Like, you don't have to do everything. Yeah. It's not all on you.
That's right. I'm a soldier. You tell me what to do, I go do it.
Don't ask me to initiate.
But if I have to think of it myself, if I forget it, I feel bad, because all of a sudden I see her walking the trash out. I'm like, that's my job. Like, I need to be doing that.
But I guess my mindset was, I chose to do this, so I'm responsible for all the pieces of it.
Yeah,
But also people chose to be my friends.
for sure.
And, that's part of friendship. I would want to do that. So why can't I accept it myself?
Yeah, one of the things we had to learn through Dustin dying of brain cancer, my brother-in-law, I guess 8 years ago now, and then Grady, was like that you take away people's blessings when you don't let them help you. And that was just staggering to me because I've always been that way. I mean, I don't need your, I'm not going to ask for help. I got it. I'm going to, headstrong, and my wife's the same way. But like it made me think of like when I help other people, I always get so blessed for it. When you go and serve somebody, when you stay up with somebody's kid, when you go to the hospital, when you visit them when they're sick or weak or whatever, I always leave being like, man, that was incredible. I'm so glad I did that. God bless me.
Yeah.
And so I had to think like, man, other people want to do that sincerely. And when I don't let them, they don't receive that blessing. They don't get to serve and learn a lesson and sacrifice. And, the disciples were like, literally did that. They're like, Jesus, you can't wash my feet.
Right.
And it's like, that's so many times us is like, people are willing to, their heart's in the right place. And we're like, well, nah, don't wash my feet. Then I'm going to owe you, or then I'm going to feel bad, or then I'm going to feel obligated, or.
Right.
I mean, and who are we
to
say that we're anything and can handle this? Because we obviously cannot.
Yes.
And again, like we did not sign up for this. We did not think we're these great people that can do this hard thing. No, it just was there, and then God gave us the strength to deal with it day by day.
Absolutely.
We were talking about the other day. I mean, I think we've had 7 placements, maybe 6 or 7. And, it's an extended family is what it is. I mean, we don't get to see them. We have very limited contact or no contact once they leave our house, just because that's how the system is set up. And that's okay because it's not our rules, but, that's our extended family. And that's who we've invested in and who we care about. And we want to see success for them, but, we're just not there. We're here. We're always will be here, but most of our kids are so young that they're never going to know, besides maybe a few pictures that we were able to send with them, that we took care of them. So
yeah. Now, is that an option, or do you guys do people get to pick like age range?
You specify whatever you want to take into. I mean, you can say you only want girls or boys or whatever. You can say you only want a specific race or not one. You can pick your age range. We just always chose to do younger than
the babies. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Younger than our children too, because
absolutely.
We didn't want to bring into our house something that a child was going through that our child would be exposed to at that point, and so the younger children at our age range, we said, this is what we can handle right now. And
I think that brings up a huge point in all of this that is important. So I think when it comes to we'll get into this, the church. So, you talked about adoption, and we talk about the church serving, and we talk about this with missions, international missions, local missions. We talk about this. I mean, what you're doing is a mission focused thing, right? You're getting in the trenches, and we start trying to like pick apart. Oh, well, y'all don't want to take a 15-year-old boy in your house. Like that's not serving enough. Like we start going down this rabbit hole, but it's like, if everyone was doing their part, then everyone could kind of, like I say this all the time, I wish when we were younger and didn't have kids, we would have done so much more for Jesus.
Right.
Right? Like, because we had the opportunity to, we had the time to, but because we didn't know better, we screwed off a lot and didn't do all the things we can't do now. It's like, then right before we had kids, I was going on mission trips to New Orleans. Like I was doing everything. And then we had Grady, and it was like for 3 years, all that was just shut down for the most part. Part of it was practical.
Right.
But part of it, I shame myself a lot of like, oh, I'm not doing this. But then I think, well, there are 100 of other single people who don't have kids or are single that could be going that aren't. But now here I am with a special needs kid feeling guilty about not going. And so I would say the same thing to y'all or anybody listening that's trying to foster. It's okay to figure out what's best for your family and what's the right fit. Don't take on things that are going to cause problems. There are other people out there that are just as responsible to take those. There are people without 2 girls who can take 15-year-old little boys.
Right.
And just because you have those parameters on your paperwork doesn't mean they're not going to call you for something that's outside of it. So if God really was trying to stretch you and wanted you to have
Absolutely.
something opposite of what you thought, then he's going to put it there.
Absolutely. I just mean that I don't think you need to shame yourself if you
Right.
make a choice that's best for your family. You're already trying to do something hard. So don't try to be a superhero and ignore maybe the red flags or the kind of bells and whistles that go, okay, you have two little girls. It's probably going to be problematic to take the 15-year-old boy when there are other people who can.
Right. And part of it is information and knowledge. I mean, when we were ignorant, you could be excused for some of these things. But once you know these things and that God has put, given you a heart for it, then that's when we need to act. And, we didn't know as much about it until we got into it. And certainly, now that we're in it, we're like, man, this is super important. Like these kids, I mean, the stat, it's not my stat. I've seen it, I'm copying it from several probably, adoption and foster ministries. But, as many churches that we have in the United States, especially in Louisiana, we have more churches than we have kids that are in need of being
Adoption.
fostered or adopted. That each church would, if they would just, raise up a family in their church and adopt a child, all the kids would be adopted in Louisiana.
It's
I mean,
insane.
It is insane. But we don't think about those things. And that seems foreign to us until you look at it in those kind of parameters. That the church body we're meant to be different from the rest of the world. I mean, that's what we're called to be. And we have to look at those, of abnormal ways to solve things that God gives us and be able to jump into those things. But certainly, I mean, like I said before, our church family, the people that we have that were close to us, that really cared about us and checked up on us and watched out for us and provided for us, like they were the ones that encouraged us, that lifted us up in order to be able to do anything that we could do. And it wasn't, if it wasn't for God and it wasn't for the people that he put around us and where we were, we would have failed. I mean, we wouldn't have been able to keep these children as long as we were and be able to do what we were asked to do.
Yeah.
And I think I've, had people ask, well, what can we do to help? And I really want to be like, you can sign up for foster classes. Here's the information. And I get that everybody's not going to do that. I mean, but that's number one, what you need. You need more foster families, and not just more foster families, but ones that are actually safe and loving homes for kids who have already been through so much. Pray for us. So instead of congratulations, which I said was kind of, I felt like inappropriate, maybe say, hey, I know this is going to be, tough, especially in the beginning. Like, I'm going to be praying for you. Is there anything specific I can pray for? That would be awesome. We do accept food on occasion, though I say cooking's my therapy. So sometimes that's hard for me, even though I don't really have time to do it, because I get so much joy from that to, let somebody else do that for me.
But for any family that's going through that, I mean, not having to worry about the meal is such a big deal.
Yeah, and gift cards are king.
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, don't cook, like sometimes meal trains are terrible because everybody cooks you stuff you don't want to eat, and then you have 4,000 things lined up. But the best thing you can do is give somebody a gift card so they can go get what they want.
Right. I love casseroles, but 10 casseroles in a row.
Absolutely.
I'm over casseroles.
Or like when you got so used to eating dessert.
Oh yeah, that was right.
I'm like, we shouldn't eat dessert.
I think that was
every
our
night.
first child. We had dessert with every meal train. Every meal, and I was like,
We're
oh,
so
this
grateful
is great.
for all
Yeah.
those brownies.
Yeah, thank you.
Well,
Well, I think that's a key point though, is that joke, right? That we're so grateful. You can be grateful that everybody helped and also them not be helping very well.
Yeah.
And I think if you're a sincere person out there and you want to genuinely help, then the best thing we can do is ask, like, how can I specifically help you? Which then means for those of us who are stubborn, we have to be able to say, hey, I don't need you to cook for me. Can you come take my laundry and do something with it? Or can you just come sit on the porch and talk to me? Or can y'all come pray outside in the yard? I mean, that's been what's been life-saving for us, is people doing the specific things that we need. And it is hard. I mean, it was hard to tell you, hey, you can't come over and stay up with our kid, but it's not what we needed at the time, and it wasn't what was going to help us. It was the joy of you offering was such a gift. And that's what I would challenge people is like, just offer something. People appreciate your efforts, but don't necessarily force, a casserole on somebody when that's not what they need.
Right. And I know Shannon said, that's our first thing is, come be foster parents with us. I don't think that's everyone's calling. I don't. I mean, I think a lot of people can do it that don't think they can. But you have to be called into these things too.
Absolutely.
And we were called in a different route. We didn't understand how we were getting there, but we got there. And I think there's lots of people that are like that. And it's encouraging those people, especially in the church, having programs that give information, things like this, that you can, the more information you have, the better you can inform a decision. Because just because God's calling you to something, if you don't know what it is or you don't know how to do it, you still have to have that, and you have to have guidance on what's the next step.
Yeah, and I think we all feel that guilt, or a lot of us feel that shame. You go to something or listen to this podcast, or you hear a missionary come from Tanzania or whatever, and you're like, oh, I'm a terrible Christian. I should definitely give up my whole life and go do that. And it reminds me of that story of the rich young ruler. It's like, God's not calling all of us to sell all of our possessions and go be poor.
Yeah.
That's what that guy's problem was. And so I think the challenge we will have is like, think about it in your own heart.
Right.
Are you not fostering or adopting or helping in this world because you just don't know, or you're scared, or you're fearful about what people are going to think, or how difficult it's going to be for you? Like, really pray and ask God to kind of remove those. Or are you a person that's like, no, I do this thing specifically and God's called me to this, and I just don't have the capacity and don't feel called to that? But I think we're all called to help with this. So can I pay for somebody? Do I know somebody who's adopting? So Can I help them? It's kind of I can pray, I can pay, or I can go.
Yeah.
And I think that works in this area too. Would you say?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And we're just normal people. Like, we do everything everybody else
does.
I mean, like, he goes to work and we do carpool, and they just fit into our lives. So it's not like, yes, your world does get turned upside down, but it's not always like, so,
yeah,
I don't know.
Well, it's both,
but
it is different. You guys do take on something, but I think that's the beauty of being, I know y'all's belief is being Christ followers, is that that's the beauty in it. You get to see Christ show up in something that all of a sudden now you're saying this. And I know you believe that. It's not true, right? It's not normal to take a kid out of somebody else's family into your family, change that whole thing. That's not the average normal way God intended it to be. But the beauty is that God shows up and makes it normal. He makes it part of the plan. He equips you with the strength and the wisdom and the community.
I guess what I mean, like, you don't have to go out and buy a 16-passenger van and take in 5 kids at once. Like, that's not what everybody's foster journey looks like. There are people that do that, and they're amazing. I don't know how they do it, because I can barely handle, what I'm given at a time. But that, I don't know. I lost my train of.
Well, I think, Jesus he tells us, give up your life so you can have what I have for you. And that's what we have. My idea was, we have 2 wonderful children and we have this perfect little family. And what happens when we bring in children from the outside that have issues? Like, that's going to mess us up. Mm-hmm. And that's what my thinking was. And when we gave that up, even though I wouldn't say 100% gave it up myself, like, I had my wife's help with that, but we did it as one.
Yeah.
When we gave that up, we gained so much more, and we gained, his what he had for us, which was so much better. And it's true. My life now with Sam in it, with these children that have come in, that they, any little kid in my house is a burden. I told Shannon, I said, you're the one that, let these kids in. I can't sleep in today because I have to go, take them to school or whatever. They are extra responsibilities, and that's part of it. But they're they give me so much life. I've been blessed over and over and over by the children that we've had in our house. And I would have missed out on all that if I had not been willing to give that up. Mm-hmm. To give up my idea of what we should have.
Yeah, that's good.
And I think that's it. Like, we're not supposed to look like everybody else. We're supposed to look different. And that's so important for me to live that out in front of our kids. So they see, like, yeah, maybe we were uncomfortable in this time and we didn't get to do all the things or have all the things, but look what God did right in front of us, you know, through these kids coming and them being able to love on them. And they just jump right in. Like, they'll ask me, like, so are we getting another one anytime? Like, I mean, they just are so on board, and, you know, only God, because it's not our parenting for sure.
Well, yeah, I mean, Isabel and Olivia are fantastic. But I mean, think about, I can already see 10 years from now, 15 years from now, the way they parent, the way they mother, the way they do. I mean, it's going to be a story. Yeah. And it's going to be because of y'all's sacrifice and your service and what God's doing in their lives. And, you know, that's the hope we have, right? Is that it pays dividends in ways that they're far ahead of us. I mean, I think all of us hope our kids are way better than we are way earlier.
Right.
You know, I hope Grady and Jude are way more loving and more patient and more kind and more missional. They don't figure it out when they're 30, you know, like, you know, they don't figure it out when they're 25. They get it because they get to see us doing what we do.
But I think so many people think I'm bringing in this negative to
absolutely.
my home, but we've seen how it's positive.
Absolutely. And far more positive than it is negative.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because the reality is that it's going to be difficult.
I mean, did I want to talk to I guess she was probably 11 at the time, about being a single mom? No, but we had a child in our home that was the child of a 16-year-old. And so, you know, that gave us not a comfortable conversation, but a conversation, you know, needed to be had and learned from. And so I think we're protecting them, yes, but they're still eventually going to go out into that big world. And, you know, it's not perfect. It's messy. They're hurting people, and everyone doesn't live in a family like ours, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's such a good point of the balance between educating your kid and preparing them and discipling them and protecting them.
Yeah.
You know, we've swung, and I've talked about this before, we've swung in this culture of, I got to have this nice little happy family. The world's big and scary, but you can educate and prepare your kid and teach them to disciple and work through things if the story is about how good Jesus is. If the story is about you and keeping yourself comfortable and calm and perfect, then it is really scary to talk to them about a single mother or about sex or about pornography or about, you know, whatever the thing is that's taboo that we don't want to talk about.
Right.
You don't have to fully immerse them in it, right? But you also don't need to hide it and keep it secret. And it's that dance in life. And if you plan on never serving a homeless person, never dealing with a prostitute, never adopting someone, never going to prison, like, if you plan on never doing any of the things and being around the people that Jesus was around or taught us to be around, then when your kid's 18 or 19 and they walk into the world and those people are there, then their view of them is going to be very broken.
Or they're going to see the world's way of handling those people, and they're going to be like, why couldn't the church do that? Why didn't I do that? I grew up not doing any of these things. And people care, and people are loving on these people that need love and are broken, and we did nothing.
Oh, yeah.
You know, again, this is not to say we're doing everything right, but, you know, I've taken my daughters, and we've taken our daughters and Sam as well to do mission work, you know, in Dallas-Fort Worth, where there's a large refugee community, and they've gone and helped and talked to people and gotten to pray with them and seen just the different things that we're doing just to try to show the love of God. And, you know, nothing with us, but I see the way they have conversations about those kind of things, and I see other kids, and I'm like, they get it because they've seen it, and it's that, you know, they're experiencing it, and they know that Jesus loves all these kids. Here I'm crying again. That he loves all these people from all over the world, and that there's a desire for his people to go and share that with them, because he loved us first, or he loved us, and when we're given something, he wants us to give it out too. And so, you know, every blessing we have, that we would bless others. And so I see that in them, and I want to encourage that in them, and let God, you know, tend that garden, so that as they're growing, they have a much better view of who God is, and it's not just on paper, but that the experience of it. And same thing with foster care, that they know these kids that are coming from broken homes or in bad situations or whatever the thing is, that God loves them, but he also loves those families, and that God wants to see, reconciliation. He wants to see things that were broken be put back together. And so it's good for us, but I think our family has benefited from it as well.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Well, I think for a while I felt guilty about, what am I taking away from my kids with fostering, and then with adopting, Sam with special needs that, makes it hard where you're in the hospital, or, they get to see an ambulance come to their house, or, but yes, the joy that he has brought into our lives and so many other people. I mean, I don't think you can meet him and not love him.
No, for sure not.
His joy is infectious. Anyway, so, I think I would say that for sure to anybody, that all those, misconceptions and fears, and God can turn all of it for good.
Yeah, for sure. Can you talk a little bit about, so when people see your kid, when they see Sam, right? If somebody, let's talk about special needs for just a second. So if you see a kid in a wheelchair, you see a kid who can't talk, right? What would be the proper response, or what's helpful for you guys? Or what should people know? Because I think people just don't know what to do, so they do all the wrong things.
Right. And the first thing that I have to remember in our situation, Sam doesn't care. He's not affected by it. There's other kids that it's tough because they see everyone else has, can walk and do different things or whatever it is that they don't have. And they're like, why me? And I, my heart goes out to that, because I'm not in that place. Like, my son is not having to deal with hearing, offhanded comments or whatever else. And usually not in a bad place, usually right from young kids or something like, look at him, what's up with him, what's wrong, or whatever. Mm-hmm. And those things, for the most part, just flow off of me. But Sam's not affected by it either. He's too busy worrying about what he's going to put in his mouth or whatever. That's how he is, but that's okay. But certainly, I would say that, people that just are passing by, like, I wouldn't worry much about what they have to say. It's the people that I know and love that, they're still having to process it as well. And I have to come from a place, before I tell other people this is what you shouldn't do, I have to realize that they're having to figure this out. I've already figured it out, because we've been dealing with it, but that they're just getting exposed to it, and that there's shock there, or mm-hmm. There's a processing there, and just for me to be encouraging, like, I wouldn't call him that, he's not, whatever name you used on him or whatever, but he's unique, or whatever, So what I'm saying is I don't necessarily have something, and Shannon may, and that's fine, but I don't necessarily have something for other people. I just need it. My reminder as his father is that how I see him, how the people that he loves and that love him see him, and how God sees him. And so that's the kind of reminder I have, is not to worry about the outside of who's saying this and what are they saying.
Mm-hmm.
So today we went to a doctor's appointment, and this little boy is just straight up staring at him. Which I just kind of, they're kids, they're going to be kids. And the mom's like, whatever his name is, it's rude to stare. You're not supposed to stare. And I just looked at him and said, his name's Sam. Do you want to come say hi or whatever? And just trying to, I'm like, he doesn't care. He was happy looking at the fish. He didn't care that the kid was staring at him. But still, I think there are kids that do know, so it's important to educate people.
Yeah.
Just because they're in a wheelchair or they can't do what you do doesn't mean they're still a person.
Right.
We still need to respect each other and be kind. But yeah, when kids see something different, they have questions, and please come ask me questions. I would love probably, and I should have done this a long time ago, but stand in front of his, group of kids at church and say, hey, this is Sam. I know it looks like this, but actually, he can hear what you're saying and know, he can play ball with you. He can do,
mm-hmm.
All the things he can do. Because I think so much it's you know, you go to the doctor's office and do these checklists where like I can't check any boxes.
Yeah.
You know, I can't fill in any yeses on their standard form, but Sam can do a lot.
Yeah.
You know,
That's good.
so.
Yeah, I think I would be encouraging as your friends, you know, and if you are friends of people who have a kid who's in special need or foster care or any of the things that don't fit in the quote unquote, I mean, there's no such thing as normal in my opinion, but what you're used to seeing, right? I mean, I just spend time before we go to church, or if I know we're going to be around Sam, telling the boys like, hey, you know, like we were talking about y'all coming over or doing something. And you were coming to the park, and he's like, oh yeah, Sam, he's in my class, and you know, but we have had conversations with him like, hey, go give him attention. He can hear you. He can talk to you. Say hey to him like you would do anybody else. And because of that, like Grady doesn't make a thing of it. He's just like, oh, what's up? It's Sam, and he's here, and he knows what he can tolerate and what he can't. And he comes up at the park and says, hey, Sam, and now he doesn't try to do more than that. But that's all that you like. I think that's people's problems. They feel like they have to do this big thing or nothing.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, just you see a guy on the side of the street who's homeless, roll the window down and say, hey, how can I pray for you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't do nothing.
Right.
Don't give him $100 either. You know, like there's just this awkwardness that I think we feel so uncomfortable with, and that's about us. And I think that was your point, is check our own hearts.
Yeah.
Because I get it. I mean, it took me forever. We had his first wheelchair. I'd be like, it's too hard to put it together. Really, I didn't want to put him in that wheelchair.
Yeah.
I could use the stroller, and like nobody would think anything different. Like he's just a kid in a stroller. But the minute I put him in that chair, like I was labeling him.
Yeah,
you
that'd
know?
be so hard.
Oh gosh, I fought it for so long.
Yeah, it's hard though.
Because I mean, we know him intimately and love him, but there's just, even though he'll never have that, I still have, you know, like people judging or thinking less of him, you know, than what I know that he is.
Absolutely. Man, I love you guys. I'm proud of y'all. I know it's a lot, and seriously, I love seeing how you guys parent your kids and love on Sam and take these kids in, and it's been really awesome.
I mean, I feel like we have been blessed, and I think a lot of it is, I mean, it's not from us. It's nothing we've done, but everything we've needed has been provided for us.
Yeah.
And, you know, even when it seemed like it was very daunting, that it was still there. God has never failed us on that.
Yeah.
And so it's been great to see.
Yeah, I think that when people listen, and you know, we've said it before, and I've said it to you about calling you saints or whatever, and it's like y'all turn that down, and you're like, oh no, we're not saints, we're just normal people. I mean, it's true though. You know, like you are normal people. You do normal things, and you have normal marriages and normal fights and normal you know, nerdy things that you like, and
Right.
and God does give us all the thing. I mean, it's the same thing when people are like, oh, you're a therapist or you're a counselor. Like, there's no way I could do that. I'm like, well, me either.
Exactly.
Like, I'm not taking any credit for any of the things that go on, or even this podcast. Like, oh, well, I'd love to do that, but I'd be really, really nervous and couldn't do it. It's like, yeah, well, I mean, we've all been equipped with different things in the body of Christ, and we all don't have to do the same thing. But my challenge for especially foster care and adoption would be for people to check their hearts and just go, okay, this is the thing God calls us to. This is the thing God does for us. Is there an area in my life where I can be praying, where I can support more, where I can do it literally? Can I start now to go, okay, you know, that's been Jason and I's conversation. You know, we had Grady, we had Jude, we just recovering essentially from Grady, it feels like. And then we have 3 miscarriages the last couple of years. And then we're like, okay. And JC just has that mom heart. I always say all the time, is like, we're going to end up fostering or adopting or something, because, you know, she's working on getting healthier and, you know, being in this space where she wants to do it or figure out what we want to do. But yeah, it's like praying about that and letting God tell you what to do, and not feeling guilty about it, but also being like, you know, checking your heart and where you're at. And
it's definitely not something you just jump into blind.
Right. You don't want to feel guilty because you listen to the podcast.
No,
or have friends
no.
who are doing it.
I don't
and
want
then be
people
like,
to have faith like that either.
Exactly.
You know,
Yeah.
we go and get excited about something, gung ho, and then 2 days later, you know, because when you're in it. Like, these kids are depending on you. So, yeah.
Absolutely.
Do it because you mean it.
Absolutely. Which means you might need to be thoughtful about it and not emotional just because you feel bad.
Mm-hmm.
And I think so much of that. Can you talk a little bit about, we got some time, and maybe the church and the people that, you know, were, let's say, pro-life, right? Anti-abortion, right?
This was actually, I was about to just interrupt and say something about it. So
Yeah, but like, how does that play into like people who are really just pro-birth,
yeah.
but then do nothing about foster care, nothing about the adoption system? Can we go
I think
a little bit of a tangent about that.
Yeah, because I think there absolutely is something spiritual about mourning the loss of life, wherever that loss of life is. But I know people gravitate towards abortion, and it's a serious issue. There's a lot to it, as far as there's people that are entrenched on both sides. But if you love life, if you love that, there are people who are living who are having such a hard time because they're children and they can't take care of themselves and they don't have the resources. And there is such I think it is a natural connection that if you are pro-abortion, or sorry,
Life.
Yeah, pro-life, right? I forget the names. Sorry, pro-life. That life, continues. If you're successful in having life go, if all these different programs that offer women to either adopt or to go ahead and have their babies, when they're thinking about abortion, that's not the end. Like then they have a baby and they need to be lifted up, or there needs to be opportunities for them to know that the choice that they made is not a bad. They didn't just ruin their child's life. They brought a child in for them to suffer and have to just barely make it, through life. And so, that's adoption, that's foster caring. Did we do this because of that? No, not necessarily. That's not what we were thinking. We wanted to save a life. We wanted to, for adoption, we wanted to bring a child into our family. We wanted to grow in our family because that was what was placed in our heart. But I see it more and more that, absolutely, there's a connection there, and that I would encourage anybody who is, pro-life, to think about that and think about what can I do to help these children that have been born, that we rejoice for. We want them to be born. We want, if a life is formed, then we want it to be a good life, and what that means. So yeah, I mean, that's all I have for it, but Shannon may have something too.
I'm pretty passionate about it. Yeah, I think if you are pro-life, you're pro-life from conception to you're 90 years old.
Cradle to the grave.
It's life.
Yeah.
Like, and I feel like it's like anything. Well, it's easy to do this, but it's hard to do that. And so sometimes we choose the easy way to support something and not the hard way.
Yeah.
Because we don't want to bring the messy stuff into our lives because, we
don't want to lose our life.
Yeah. We don't want to lose the convenience of what we have going. And I get that. I mean, we're human. We all struggle with that. But that's not what God called us. He didn't call us to be comfortable.
Yeah, for sure.
So I have personal history with this, so I won't talk too much about it, but I volunteered at the Crisis Pregnancy Center, saw women who came through and chose life mothering their babies and struggling sometimes. And I think there's a big disconnect. There's a hole there that, there are organizations that are trying to fill, but there's a lot of people falling through the cracks. And that really, if they had somebody come alongside of them, that same lady that was, holding a poster pro-life outside went alongside her in her life and helped disciple her, and teach her how to parent. She could have had a different story than her child ended up in foster care or following the same pattern. Yeah,
because you end up having you have a woman who's struggling and has a baby at 16 and is pregnant, and so you have people who are like, we can't abort these babies, that's murder, that's terrible, which you take your stance on that, and you then have them birth the baby, and now they're poor and low income, and those people are still out there with the signs, but none of those people out of the group, or very few of them compared to the actual babies being born because of the signs, are then being taught parenting, getting diapers, having a one of the beautiful things that I loved at Purchased or at the Lovewell or whatever is when they do like showers, baby showers for the ladies. And it's like, that's such a beautiful way of not just saying, hey, here's a program and here's a thing, but let's throw you a baby shower. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, how do we connect?
Get personal.
Yeah, my brain started going just now, but where's the missing link where we go, okay, where's the company, the nonprofit, the thing that is between the birth and then the young, and that is foster care.
Mm-hmm. And I think there are other things out there, but they might not necessarily know about it, or you leave the hospital and they give you a packet full of information that you never read.
Yeah, for sure.
Could have been in there, but
because you're still in fight or flight and still in survival mode while you're having this baby.
The same thing with special needs education, or even educating a typical parent that's coming out in a good situation. You still have questions and concerns.
Absolutely. You're like, you're leaving me with this baby?
Yeah.
Like you just gave
I was a NICU nurse and I was like, I really got to leave with her? Like,
right.
Are you sure I'm qualified?
Yeah, y'all ain't coming home with me? I'm going to put them in this 1,000-pound metal contraption of a car and drive them to the house. Yeah.
I was going to say, with like social media, and that we can, have, we can know pretty much anything that's going on around the world. I think our views are skewed a little bit too, because all we think about is globally, or this is a problem for all of America. This is this issue or that, and we have to take sides on everything. But, as Christians, like, my God is a relational God. He wants relationship with me. He is a personal God, and yes, he cares about all the earth, but he cares about me too. And that's what foster care is you can't solve foster care. You can't solve abandonment of the whole country or the world. What you can do is God has placed you with this baby, and you can love this baby or this child or whatever, and you can do what's in front of you. And the same thing, abortion is a large issue. It is a big issue, and everybody has to have an opinion on everything. And not to say that that's wrong at all, but to solve that, we look at our leaders and, the president or, the Congress or whatever
to pass laws.
Yeah. And that's the only way this will happen. That's not how anything will happen, in my opinion. It'll happen by people investing in people and loving on them, and the Spirit of God moving through that. But it's not, if only a small cluster of Christians do that, then you're missing out, because we have so many people that are passionate about this. We could all, be doing something.
Well, like you said, how many churches go to marches, and how many churches do signs, and how many churches give money to, tear down Planned Parenthood or do whatever, and yet there's less kids than churches. Is that what it is?
There's less kids in Louisiana. Yeah,
less kids in Louisiana than churches. So. Right. Which brings me to another idea.
But he says the harvest is plentiful and the workers are few.
Absolutely. Which goes, several other podcasts that we've done about Christianity and American church and all that stuff. But it makes me think, like, so if you're out there listening to this, and you have answers, let's come up with some, but also, like, where's the gap between birthing and foster care and that, which we covered a little bit. But also, is there a movement where we can help people, like churches, like, is there a movement of like, okay, let's just get one family from every church in Shreveport to adopt? Like, is there a movement of that sort? Like, is there some kind of training or some kind of education or some kind of thing where we could go, okay, like you're saying, we can't fix Louisiana,
right? But
can we fix Shreveport, or can we fix the churches we know? Hey, let's go around and connect and say, do we have one person here who's adopting somebody? You know what I mean? Like, if the stats are the stats, is there a way that we could do a better job educating, like we're trying to do right now, to get churches to say, oh, we actually don't have anybody in our church who's fostering, adopting, and to go, well, let's educate you on what that is, and let's talk about that, and let's see what you're called for.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And it
may be happening. Right.
So there are several ministries that we've dealt with, or that have helped us in different ways, or that give out information.
The Baptist Children's Home.
Yeah.
They have several programs. We just did talk the other day with
the Streetmans.
Yeah. And what they do, with the Heart Gallery, and they bring around to churches.
Was that the video y'all did?
Adopted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was
awesome. So yes, there's, but it's just, there's a lot to
sure.
cover,
and as with foster care, you're dealing with, that's an emergency too, right? Because the child is there's an emergency that's happened.
Yeah.
So you've gone from birth to the emergency, and you're right. How do you prevent the emergency? How do you prevent this from happening where this child is already in a either dangerous or, hurtful or whatever kind of situation?
Well, the church can be involved in all that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We
I
should
think
be.
it goes back to, and what you've touched on before in other podcasts about what medicine looks like right now and how overwhelmed that system is. They could be the ones that are noticing stuff's going on, but they have so many patients and they're just running them through, and they see them for 5 minutes that they're not seeing it. Where if, they were able to spend more time with their patients, they may have seen the signs before we got to the emergency part.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I read a stat. I can't remember exactly, so I'm going to butcher it, but it was like the number of kids that go into foster care because of abuse. I think it was like 3.3 million or something like that worldwide. And then just how many of them get stuck in foster care, and then how many of them get adopted. And it's just atrocious.
Yeah.
But again, I think, I would just stick with the same message. If you're listening to this and with anything that we ever talk about on here, or that you hear about, it's kind of that quote of, how do you eat an elephant? And it's like one bite at a time. Right. It's like, you can't worry about the elephant. It's like, what has God given you to bite off? And so that's what would be my challenge for people, is to look at their own life and go, am I uncomfortable in any area? Right? Because as we were talking about cradle to grave, I think about all the conversations I have about elderly and, just that whole stage of life and how they're abandoned as much as kids are abandoned. And there's a whole, ministry to that Jesus calls us to. And it's like, well, that's not the point. Let's not get overwhelmed with all of the detail. Let's just figure out through the word, through community, through prayer, what God has for me, and then step out in obedience. But if you're completely comfortable and you have all your needs met and you're like, my life's perfect and there's no tension, you might want to check in, because something probably is going to happen pretty soon.
My challenge always is, if people looked into your life right now and how you were living, would they see Jesus in it? The sacrificial giving up of yourself. Mm-hmm. Would they be able to see that in your life? And if not, then you're not living for Christ. Yeah. You're living for self.
That's good.
Yeah.
But all right, let me see if I got anything left. That was great. No, I think we got everything we needed. Any resources, I guess, or last minute encouraging for those people that are out there that are fostering it right now and struggling?
I mean, locally, I think, there's the foster closet in Benton, or close to Benton, right?
Yeah. Cypress Baptist.
That just provides, items of clothing or anything that you may need, that they're doing their best to try and
really
things.
Their heart too is to reach those families that are taking in those kids that then don't, necessarily have the resources, but they're willing to take in, their family, and they try to help them, with clothing and different things, because they're not getting a support check, know.
Right. The Baptist Children's Home, we have dear friends that are part of that, we know their heart, and they care about kids, and they want to see families being able to succeed and help in any way to help these kids.
I'm part of a Facebook group for foster families, and that's all that's on there, so you can be as honest as you want to be.
What's that called?
You have to ask to be put on it, but I think it's just Shreveport foster families.
Gotcha.
And we've seen CASA workers, which are the court appointed special advocates. I should know that. I'm the guy that's in court all the time. But yeah, and, that they're volunteers. There's a volunteer organization. You just go and help, families and kids that are.
Isn't Philip Martinez now over there? Yep.
Yeah, that's right. And so there are lots of resources, and there are lots of people that care, and that's the great thing.
For sure.
That we didn't know before getting into this, that there's so many people that care and that are doing what they've been called to do, and it's a big system, and there's so much. There's always going to be a need, and there's room for others to come, and so that's my plea is that there is a way to find. I think we all care about what happens to the next generation, and that we don't just write them off. It's our responsibility to be the mentors and to be the people that they can look up to, and regardless of what happened to us, with our generation. And not to say I have wonderful parents. I'm not calling them out or anything, but that that we would just realize that, you know, there is a call for us to be that next, that gap that helps them, you know, achieve what God has for them.
That's good. Shannon, any encouragement for moms or dads that are out there fostering right now and really struggling?
You can give me your phone number. Call me.
No,
Yeah.
I really would. Like, just give me a call. I mean, I haven't faced everything that there is to face, but there probably is someone who has. And yeah, I mean, reach out. There's people, you're not alone, and we're praying for you.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, there's no shame. I mean, you're blessed just because of your obedience, and you know, there's no winners or losers in this. We're all in this together.
And Aaron has to remind me all the time that, you know, when I don't see the results I want in whatever situation, that it's just being obedient. And that's what God called you to do, is to be obedient. So if you're doing that, then you're good.
We already won.
That's right.
We already have the promise of Jesus and eternal life. So everything else is just being obedient, and that we were made for good works.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we don't have to do the good works anymore to you know, to have that promise. So now we're just made for it, and we get to. Yeah. So
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
that's the
What a
encouragement that we
joy
have.
that he lets us be involved, you know.
Absolutely. Well, thank you all for coming on and talking through it. You did great. I would just encourage anybody who's out there struggling, whether through foster care or adoption, or if you're a person who's been through the foster care or been adopted, you know, therapy is a great place to heal and get healthy, and find a church to plug into, discipleship group, mentorship, you know, other foster care parents. But like Shannon and I, all of us said, you know, reaching out and being vulnerable and asking for help is super important. And that's hard. But we have to check our pride and check our feelings of inadequacy and be able to say, okay, I need some help, because the kids and the people who are in our care and God's place in our care are more important than our ego or our pride or our insecurities. So
Can I just pray real quick?
Yeah,
Is that okay?
please.
All right. Thank you, Father. I just thank you just for this opportunity, Lord. And I thank you, Lord, that the words that were spoken, Lord, are not what's important, Lord, but that you would be able to speak to people that are listening to this podcast, Lord. I thank you, Father, for your goodness and your grace, Lord. And I thank you, Lord, that you would just continue, Lord, to build on this, Lord, that you would bless, Lord, the people that are hearing this, and that you would just give them the confidence, Lord, to know that you have their backing, Lord, on the choices they make. I just thank you, Father, that we would all seek you first, and that we would give all glory to you. In Jesus' name, amen.
amen. That's a good way to end it. Thank you guys. Love y'all.